Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something really fascinating and incredibly relevant. We're looking at Mikkel Lang-Jensen Farsby's two-volume series, Humanitarian Experience and Logic. But, we aren't just going to sit here and summarize the chapters today. Instead, we're focusing on the underlying intent. We really want to get to the bottom of the author's true purpose. Like, why did a logistics expert, a guy completely used to the neat predictability of supply chains and warehouses, feel so compelled to write this massive exploration of humanitarian ethics and decision-making?
Okay, let's dive right into this. What actually drives someone to tackle such a profoundly complex ethical subject? Well, by 2025, Forsby realized that he needed to gather years of intense, boots-on-the-ground experiences into some kind of coherent whole. He had documented events, sure, but he hadn't really untangled how they had shaped him, or why certain memories just refused to let him go. He was kind of searching for a language that, honestly, didn't even exist yet. He needed a way to explain how people navigate that incredibly narrow space between rigid formal systems and the raw, totally unpredictable reality of human relationships during a crisis.
And that search for language brings us to this incredibly powerful thesis statement straight from the text. Farsby says, "I do not write to expose anyone. I write to expose the room." Now, I want you to really hold on to that thought. His purpose here is absolutely not whistleblowing. He isn't out to point fingers at specific organizations or individuals who messed up. Instead, his goal is to illuminate the systemic friction. He wants to show us the hidden realities and the invisible pressures of aid work that make the truth so incredibly fragile.
And to pull this off, Farsby roots his whole philosophy in actual lived realities. We're not talking about some abstract academic theory cooked up in a comfy, distant office. No, this logic was forged in the dust and the chaos, spanning everywhere from Cambodia to Nepal, from Syria to Jamaica. It's a philosophy born directly from pressure, silence, and real human encounters.
Moving into Section 1, the Humanitarian Paradox, Ideals versus Reality.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core dilemma that really kicked off his whole journey, that massive gap between clean moral principles and very messy realities. Farsby tells us that his inner logic was actually formed far, far away from crisis zones. It was formed on a golf course. See, golf taught him that integrity is an inner line, right? It's not an external rule. You call a penalty on yourself even when literally no one else is watching. It's clean, it's fair. But then, imagine a sudden food shortage in a refugee camp. Do you give everyone smaller portions? Do healthy adults get less just so the vulnerable children can get full rations? How do you act fairly when literally every single option has severe, real-world consequences? That old logic of simple fairness suddenly breaks down under the immense weight of human survival. A new logic was desperately needed.
All right, Section 2, Seeds of Idealism, the Catalyst.
So where did this new logic actually come from? Well, we've got to look way back at his personal foundation, because these seeds were planted during childhood. Every single year on his birthday, his mother told him two specific stories. One was about the Battle of Copenhagen in 1801, which is this great story of a small nation resisting imbalance, and it planted a deep seed of justice and courage in him. The other story was about Hans Christian Andersen, which planted a seed of curiosity and a real willingness to step right into the unknown. He was basically constantly searching for fertile ground to let these values grow.
Which leads us to this really profound takeaway. Experience is never neutral, and neither is the inner journey that shapes it. Forsby realized that his views on integrity were forming long before he ever entered international aid. He didn't just casually walk into a disaster zone as a blank slate, He brought his inner line of responsibility right in with him. And his purpose in writing this is partly to show us that we all bring our inner journeys into our professional lives. And just acknowledging that fact is the very first step toward true accountability.
That brings us to Section 3, Reality in the Field, the Collision. So let's see what happens when those high ideals actually slam into reality out in the field. When Farsby arrived in Cambodia, he showed up with a genuine desire to understand climate change impacts. But he pretty quickly discovered a jarring truth. His mere presence as a foreigner altered reality. He was treated almost like a celebrity just for being there, totally changing the dynamics of the room before he even spoke a single word. Later on, during the devastating 2015 Nepal earthquake, amidst all the rapid, chaotic logistical decisions, he realized something else. When external actors swoop in to save the day, they often ignore the fact that real development has to strengthen existing local capacity, not just overwrite it. Good intentions, as he found out, just aren't going to cut it. What he discovered is that truth in this line of work isn't some fixed, measurable thing. It's more like a room where all the lines are completely tangled up. Think of it like a giant puzzle. Everyone is standing in this room together, but absolutely no one sees or feels the exact same thing. And the truth actually changes the moment someone starts watching. Why? Because everyone involved is desperately trying to do the right thing, to be righteous, and to perform their expected role perfectly.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how the performance plays out on the ground. Through a local Cambodian contact named Soka, Farsby learned exactly how this works. Believe it or not, locals often don't want donors visiting their villages. Not out of malice, but out of care. When donors show up looking for results, the local community basically begins performing whatever they think the donors want to see. Meanwhile, local staff are caught right in the middle, trying to balance those expectations with the harsh reality. So everyone is kind of inadvertently hiding the real situation from each other, all while genuinely trying their absolute best to be helpful. That dynamic right there, that is the room Farsby wants to expose.
Let's move on to Section 4, the 5 cornerstones, a new paradigm.
Seeing all this tragic dysfunction, Farsby doesn't just point out the problems, he offers a solution. He outlines these 5 cornerstones of humanitarian logic. And it's super important to remember, these are not some strict checklist or a rigid manual. They are an ethical compass for daily decisions. Number 1 is relational continuity, meaning trust is built over time, it's not just used as a resource. 2 is relational integrity, taking real responsibility for the actual consequences of your good intentions. 3 is foresight, anticipating the tensions before they explode. 4 is fairness and equity, adjusting support to real needs, not just checking arbitrary boxes. And 5 is communication as responsibility, understanding that the words we use literally shape reality.
But you know, these cornerstones don't just exist in a vacuum. Different groups interact with them in totally different ways. Practitioners in the field, they carry these cornerstones in their physical actions every day. The local communities are the ones who have to live with the actual tangible consequences of those actions. And meanwhile, headquarters and the donors shape these cornerstones from afar through their systems and funding decisions. Farsby's point here is that none of these perspectives works on its own. They have to understand each other for this whole logic to actually function.
Which takes us to Section 5, reframing experience, the core shift.
So, the crucial point here is how he redefines what it actually means to be experienced. Historically, the whole sector valued what Farsby calls positional experience. This is essentially treating experience as currency, counting your passport stamps, flexing your international exposure, or leaning on technical authority. But humanitarian logic demands relational experience. It's not at all about where you have been, it's about how you have been present. It's about your ability to take real responsibility for consequences, to act with total integrity even when unseen, and to build genuine trust.
And if we only look at positional experience, we run straight into this massive, devastating paradox. Those who live closest to the conflict, the locals who possess the deepest, most nuanced knowledge of the situation, are often the absolute last ones invited to the table to make decisions. Meanwhile, outsiders who just flew in are granted immediate authority long before they've earned a single ounce of real trust. Farsby's core purpose is to completely dismantle this harmful default setting.
Finally, Section 6, exposing the room, the ultimate purpose.
Bringing this all together, we really hit the climax of Farsby's intent, and it's perfectly summed up in this final quote. He writes, "The purpose of humanitarian logic is not to make the world simple, but to make our actions responsible within its complexity." Look, Farsby knows the world is fragile. He knows that ideals and our practice are going to clash, and that truth will always be slightly incomplete. His goal was simply to provide a shared language, a way for us to stay steady and act responsibly when the pressure is on, resources are scarce, and every single choice has a real consequence. And that leaves us with a pretty big challenge, one that honestly goes way beyond international aid. Because if you think about it, humanitarian dilemmas are really just extreme versions of the tensions we all face every day, in our families, our workplaces, in our own communities. So as you go about your week, I want to leave you with this question. How will you ensure your own actions remain responsible when you're faced with unavoidable complexity? The full text of Farsby's work is an incredible guide for navigating that very question, and I highly recommend checking it out for yourself. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning and keep asking those hard questions.